Hello and welcome to this short Morescope demonstration. My name is Jonas and I'll give you an introduction to what is carbon accounting and a demo of our tool. So I would love to jump straight into the tool itself, but it needs some introduction of what is carbon accounting and the framework we're building everything upon. So I'll use this first video to give this introduction, and in our next video we're going to jump into the tool itself. So if you already know a little bit about the GHG protocol and know about carbon accounting, you can just jump straight into the next video. So this is purely for information and show our framework. So first of all, we say that we do more than carbon accounting. We are beyond carbon accounting. What does this really mean? We do both carbon footprinting or carbon accounting, which is scope 1 to 3, defined by the GHG protocol, which I'll explain a little bit later. And we also do impact assessment, what is called also known as scope 4. So in this video and in the demo, I will focus on the carbon footprinting tool, the scope 1 to 3, what we called GHG emissions. But I just want to briefly explain also that we think that this combination between carbon footprinting and impact assessment is what is needed to actually make strategic decisions for a sustainable future within your company. So our focus on both footprinting, which is past time, so this is accounting, we're looking back in time, what has a company been emitting for a period, usually over a period of a year, defined into scope 1 to 3. So that is the focus on this video. While impact assessments are more future looking, we're talking about avoided emissions, so how much emissions are we able to avoid by making these and these decisions, and it's more LCA based than carbon accounting is. So just to understand that brief concept. But let's zoom in on carbon accounting. So carbon accounting is defined very well now with the greenhouse gas protocol, the GHG protocol, which sets a framework for how to do accounting. It kind of resembles how the accounting law makes you set certain categories for financial accounting, and this greenhouse gas protocol defines 3 main categories for how to account your emissions. It's scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So briefly, scope 1, that's internal emissions actually emitted by the company itself. It might be like in the picture here that you own a factory and you actually have emissions straight out your pipe of your factory. So this may be CO2 is maybe CH4, and the greenhouse gas protocol defines what is a greenhouse gas or not. But this is accounted directly from what is the company's emissions. So, and if you're not a factory, this may still apply for you. If you, for instance, own or operate a car, you also need to account for the emissions happening within the car. Could also be purchase of gases, other stuff like that. But these are emissions more visible for a company's eye, you can say. Scope 2 emissions are purchased energy. So that might be purchased electricity for an office. So the electricity you're using, it may come from a source that also is emitting CO2 or other greenhouse gases in one way or another. It's also very much depends on your location. So in Norway, for instance, we have a quite green electricity grid, while in countries like Poland, it's more based on coal, for instance. So this is electricity, but may also be stuff like heating or cooling, emissions like this. So it's not your emissions, it's not emissions happening within your facility, but there are emissions that you emit based on your electricity consumption, for instance. Scope 3 is, you can say, the everything else category. So all materials, all goods and services that you purchase, but also what you sell and how what you sell is being used. So it's a very big category, very broad. It haven't been mandatory to report on until recently. So this is also quite new, and as you can imagine, most of your emissions is probably within the Scope 3 category. So Scope 1, 2, and 3 is this framework that Greenhouse Gas Protocol is defining. And of course, it's hard for you as a company to get an overview of all of this. So we have created our tool to be able to manage and get an overview of all your emissions throughout your value chain. And this is the tool that I'm going to jump into now. Another thing I also want to explain a bit before jumping into the tool is a little bit about approaches. So of course we can calculate these emissions or estimate these emissions in different ways, but in detail we have three different main ways of calculations, which are transaction based on transaction data, or what is called spend based. We have bottom-up data, or it's called activity-based, or we have supplier-specific data as well. So our spend-based approach, or transaction data, it's basically based on your purchases. So in order to do this calculation, we usually integrate with your accounting system. We see the purchases you've had, and based on the purchases, the amount that's been purchased, and what kind of industry your supplier is within, we can estimate the emissions that happen here. So for instance, in this case, if I purchase $10,000 in Norwegian air travel within the Norwegian air travel industry, we can estimate that this is about 12 tons CO2 equivalent. So this is about the emissions that will happen in this industry, divided or based on how much money you put into it. It's not a very accurate method of calculation, but it gives you a very broad and good overview of everything that's happening in your company, just by a very automatic and fast integration with your accounting system. So not accurate, but it gives you a broad insight very fast. On the other hand, activity-based calculation approach, or using bottom-up data, it's more about the actual combustion, or actually what has actually been used within the company. So in this case, for instance, if you combust 50 liters of diesel fuel, we can calculate that exactly to be, or more exactly to be, 6.7 kilos of CO2 equivalents. So as you can imagine, this is way more accurate. We can here also differentiate between biodiesel and diesel and gasoline and different other fuels, for instance. But of course, it's more time consuming for a company to get an overview of how many liters has actually been combusted in all our company vehicles, for instance. So it's more accurate, but it's more time consuming to get that overview. And on the last part here, it's third-party verified emissions that are, could be customer or supplier-specific data. So in this, as an example of this, that might be that we know, for instance, based on a third-party assessment, that an LCA, or like a life cycle analysis of an iPhone X, is exactly 64 kilo of CO2 equivalents. And then it's even more accurate. We know exactly we know exactly how many iPhone X we purchased last year, and this way we can also calculate emission more exactly. Of course, this is also more time consuming. It's hard to find these numbers, but it's also it's a give and take between then how exact do you want the calculations to be, and how important is it for you to get a bigger overview, and of course how much time do you have to generate the carbon accounting. But I also want to say, in general, of course, we want the data to be more specific as possible, so lower in this hierarchy as possible. But we've anyways created this hybrid approach to use all these different data sources. And that's mainly because the GHG protocol says that it's the exact calculation is less important than to have an overview of your whole emissions. So this is already built into the tool, this hybrid approach, this way of saying that one source of data is better than another. And this gives the origin of our tool, which I will show in the next video. So bear with me there.